Hello everybody, this is the Biology Trial 2 exam review for Grade 9, Semester 2 at the International School of Innovation. Let's start with the most important part in this representation about the chapter talking about the respiration. What the meaning of respiration, what are the different components of this process, how does this process occur. We are going to identify these through the different slides. Start first, we have to know what is respiration and how does respiration occur? What is the role of the oxygen gas? What's the role of the carbon dioxide? And what do we call these two gases? First, we are going to go deeply inside the respiratory system. What are the different parts of the respiratory system? What are the different components? What is the pathway of the respiration? And many more. Let's start first with this organization of the respiratory system of humans. Let's see here we have different parts of the respiratory system. All of you know most of them during the grades 5, 6, mostly 7 also. So these organization of the respiratory system, they are classified as: first we have the nasal cavities, second we have the mouth, we have the pharynx, this is the pharynx, we have the larynx, we have the trachea, lungs, which are the most important part in the respiratory system. We have the bronchus, the bronchioles, alveoli, and finally the muscle which is called the diaphragm. So starting first, the lungs, the most important part in the process of respiration, and it's the most important organ in the respiratory system of humans. Here we have the pathway of air along the respiratory system. This one you have to study them. First we have the nasal cavities. Second we have the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus. We have the bronchioles, and finally we have the alveoli. What is the difference between breathing and respiration? Breathing is the actual mechanical intake of air. Whenever you take in air, this is called breathing. So breathing is the actual mechanical intake of air, while breathing consists of two phases. The first is called inhalation. Whenever we take in air, it's called inhalation. Whenever we take out air, this is called exhalation. Both of them, inhalation and exhalation, they are taught by the respiratory movements. Inhalation, also it's called inspiration. This process of taking in air, this air is rich in O2 and it's poor in CO2, while exhalation, it's called expiration. This is the process of releasing air outside the body. This is poor in O2 and this is rich in CO2. What the meaning of diffusion? Pay attention to this word, diffusion. We're gonna talk about this a lot during the exercises and during the applications. Diffusion is the movement of a particles of a substance from a medium of high concentration, which has a high amount of this substance. Example about this, or the pressure or volume or amount, to a medium of low concentration or low pressure, low volume, low amount in the substance. So diffusion is the movement of a substance from a medium of high concentration of the substance or high pressure or high amount to a medium of low concentration of this substance or of this pressure or of this amount. So you have to take care about this word, diffusion. What is the role of the respiratory system? The respiratory system is responsible for the gaseous exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. These two gases, as I said before, you have to pay attention to these gases. What do we call them? These two gases, oxygen and carbon dioxide, they are called the respiratory gases. The pathway of the air inside the respiratory system of a mammal is start first the nose, which contains the nasal cavities, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, plural is bronchi, branch of bronchus, bronchiole, alveolus, which is the air sac, plural is alveoli. Why? The lungs are very rich in blood vessels. Most of you know that blood vessels, they are present in a high amount in the lungs. Why? We're gonna answer this question later. Lungs, they are spongy. The meaning of this, since they have many pores of air sacs, they are called spongy. They are light and they are elastic. We have two lungs, right lung, which is made up of three lobes, and the left lung, which is made up of two lobes. Exchange of gas occur between air and blood at the level of the alveoli in the lungs. Characteristics that favor the gaseous exchange at the level of the alveoli. Also, we have characteristics, if you remember, in the digestion chapter about the characteristics that favor the intestinal absorption. These two characteristics, you have to study them. Maybe in the exam, you are going to have a part list the characteristics that favor get the gaseous exchange at the level of the alveoli. We have three characteristics, main three characteristics. The first one is called the large surface area of exchange of the alveoli. We have thin wall of the alveoli. C, which is highly vascularized, meaning that they are rich in blood vessels. So we have three characteristics. First, large surface area of exchange of alveoli. Second, thin wall of the alveoli. Three, they are highly vascularized, meaning that they are rich in blood vessels. Activity 3 in your book is talking about the respiratory gas exchange. Which gases they are the respiratory gases? We have to know already with it that they are the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Here, what happens to blood when it enters the lungs? You have to answer this question in this activity. So question number 1, according to your document A on page 42, compare the composition of the inhaled and the exhaled air. What does this comparison show? Part B, you have interpret the results shown for oxygen and carbon dioxide. Let's start first with these action verbs. Compare, interpret. Compare, you have to use the words greater than, less than, larger than, smaller than. You have to use the words of comparison. So compare, you have to say greater than, less than, higher, smaller. Interpret, interpret composed of two parts. First, analyze. Second, you have to give out an indication. So for air, in your book, both inhaled and exhaled air contain 79 milliliter of N2 gas, which is the nitrogen gas. What did this indicate in the inhaled and the exhaled? It's not consumed. So this indicates that no exchange of N2, which is nitrogen gas, occurring right now. So this is not a respiratory gas. Second, in inhaled air, the volume of O2 is 21 milliliter, which is greater than. Here you have to pay attention here. Greater than. I use the words for the comparison. So greater than. So greater than meaning that the comparison is occurring right now. So I have to compare greater than. So greater than the amount in the exhaled air, which is 16 milliliter. What does this shows? What does this indicates? This indicates that O2 diffuses, meaning that it moves from a medium of high concentration to a medium to a low concentration. In inhaled air, the volume of CO2 is 0.03 milliliter, which is less than, meaning that's less than. So we are comparing here less than the volume of CO2 in exhaled air, which is 5 milliliter. What does this show? This shows that CO2 diffuses from the alveolus toward the air. Moreover, water vapor is abundant in exhaled, but of small amount in the inhaled. This shows that in the lungs, air is moisturized, meaning that it has a abundant amount of water vapor. For blood entering the alveolus, volume of O2 was 15 milliliter, which is also less than that in a blood leaving the alveolus 20 milliliter. What does this show? This shows that O2 diffuses from the alveolus to blood. In blood entering the alveolus, volume of CO2 is 53 milliliter, which is greater than the volume of CO2 in blood leaving the alveolus, which is 49 milliliter. What does this indicate? This indicates that CO2 diffuses from the blood to alveolus. Moving to air, here we are going to interpret. Interpretation: the volume of oxygen gas in air entering the alveolus is 21 milliliter and decreases. See the word here? Decreases. I didn't say which is greater than. Greater than or less than, we are comparing. Here, I'm doing the analysis. Analyze, you have to say increase, decrease. Okay, increases or decreases. Here it decreases to 16 milliliter. What does this indicate? This indicates this part in the red one. This is the indication. This indicates that oxygen diffuses from air toward alveolus, from a medium of high concentration to a medium of low concentration. Moving to carbon dioxide in the air, the volume of carbon dioxide in air entering the alveolus was 0.03 milliliter and increases. Here increases, decreases. Increases to 5 milliliter in the air leaving the alveolus. What does this indicate? This indicates that carbon dioxide diffuses from the alveolus toward air. As I said, diffusion from a medium of high concentration to a medium of a low concentration. For blood, the quantity of oxygen, as we said, in the blood entering the alveolus was 15 milliliter and it increases to 20 in blood leaving. What does this indicate? This indicates that oxygen diffuses from a medium of high concentration, which is the alveolus, to a medium of low concentration, which is the blood. Also, carbon dioxide is amount of carbon dioxide in blood entering was 53 milliliter and decreases to 49. Also, I use decreases here. So what does this indicate? This indicates that carbon dioxide diffuses from a medium of high concentration, which is the blood, to a medium of low concentration, which is the lungs. Here I did the analysis, which is in the blue, and the indication, which is in red. So here an extra application. Here is an extra application. Here we have a table showing for each 100 milliliter of blood, the blood entering the lungs, blood leaving, quantity of O2, quantity of CO2. Compare, as I said before, you have to use greater than, less than. As you see here, compare the results on the table showing the composition of blood entering and blood leaving the lungs. We can see here that blood entering the lungs contains less oxygen than blood leaving the lungs, which is 20, and the amount of blood leaving the lungs has a higher amount of oxygen than the blood entering. Why? The blood entering the lungs contain more amount of carbon dioxide, which is 53, than the blood leaving, which contains 49. This table shows the variation of the quantity of oxygen and carbon dioxide in blood entering and blood leaving. Moving to interpretation. Interpretation here, I have to do both analyze plus interpret. This is the first part. Let's compare. The blood entering the lungs contains less oxygen, 15 milliliter, than the blood leaving, while the blood entering the lungs contains more carbon dioxide than the blood leaving the lungs. Interpretation: the quantity of oxygen in the blood entering the lungs, it was 15 milliliter and increases. You see here I said increases to 20 in the blood leaving. What does this indicate? This indicates that the oxygen diffuses from the lungs to the blood. As you see here, oxygen diffuses always from the lungs to blood, medium of high concentration to a medium of low concentration. The quantity of carbon dioxide in blood entering the lungs was 53 milliliter and it decreases to 49 milliliter in blood leaving the lungs. What does this indicate? This indicates that the carbon dioxide diffuses from blood medium of high concentration to the lungs medium of low concentration. As you see, the lungs they allow the movement of both carbon dioxide and oxygen. So oxygen diffuses from the lungs medium of high to the blood and vice versa for the amount of carbon dioxide. Blood entering oxygen, while the blood leaving is rich in oxygen. These figures show the alveoli in the lungs contain oxygen, carbon dioxide, and this blood capillary. So question number 2, moving back to you have to describe the gases exchange with the blood at the level of the alveolus. You have to schematize. This scheme, you have to study it, you have to know how to draw it, have to know how to label it, different components. So oxygen diffuses from the lungs medium that's rich in oxygen to blood which is poor in oxygen, while the carbon dioxide diffuses from blood medium of high concentration of carbon dioxide, meaning that it's rich in carbon dioxide, to lungs which is poor in carbon dioxide. This scheme showing the respiratory gas exchange between blood and air and the alveolus, diffusion of oxygen and diffusion of carbon dioxide. This figure, you have it in your copybook, you have to study it, you have to know how to label it. Whenever we have any figure, you have to know how to draw it using a pencil, draw it inside a box, and third, you have to give it a title. These are the three important components of any figure. Draw it using a pencil, draw it inside a box, and number 3, don't forget to give it a title. Question number 3, construct an histogram showing the composition of blood entering and blood leaving the lungs. Histogram, this is a simple one. Here we move to question number 4. Question number 4 says that you have to describe the respiratory gas exchange with blood at the level of tissues. So as we know that oxygen gas diffuses from blood, which is rich in oxygen, to cells that are poor in O2, example about these organs, tissues, and so on, while CO2 gas is diffused from cells that are rich in CO2 to blood, which is poor in CO2. Also here, I can ask you in the exam, for example, you have to draw a figure showing the respiratory gas exchange with blood at the level of tissue, the same as the previous one, but you have to change some of the diffusion properties of some arrows and so on. Question number 4. What favors the respiratory gas exchange at the level of the capillaries? As we said before, we have three properties. 1. Large surface area of the capillaries. Number 2. Thin wall of blood capillaries. Number 3. Slow circulation of blood and the blood capillaries. So these three properties, you have to study them. First one, we have a large surface area of the capillaries. Second, we have thin wall of blood capillaries. 3. The slow circulation of blood and the blood capillaries facilitates the respiratory gas exchange. Now moving to activity 4, the transport of the respiratory gases. This is one of the most important activities in the chapter of respiration. So activity 4, we have this figure. We have blood entering in the lungs. It has a dark red color because it's poor in oxygen. Then we have at the level of the lungs, the color starts to be less dark in color because we have diffusion of CO2 outside and we have entrance of O2 which diffuses toward the blood, and finally the blood leaving the lungs, as you see here, it has a bright red color. Why? Because it's rich in O2, oxygen, and it's poor in CO2. That's why the bright red color. So how are these gases transported by blood? This is the most important question. How are these gases transported by blood? As you know, here we have blood. We have composed of plasma 55%, 1% or less than 1% white blood cells and platelets, and we have 45% red blood cells. So the plasma are mostly water. It carries dissolved molecules and plasma proteins for clotting. Red blood cells, they transport oxygen and carbon dioxide, which are bound to hemoglobin. No nucleus, they can repair themselves. They have a 120-day lifespan. White blood cells, they are classified as the immune cells. Hematocrit, please pay attention to this. Hematocrit is the percentage by volume of the red blood cells in blood, percentage by volume of red blood cells in blood. So this is the shape of the red blood cells. Here, some properties, they are disc shaped. They are anucleated, so they don't have a nucleus. They are approximately 5 million red blood cells per millimeter cube, and they contain a protein which is called hemoglobin of the symbol Hb, H capital B small. And finally, Hb can bind, hemoglobin can bind either to O2 or to CO2 in reactions. We're gonna talk about them in the coming slides. Here you have to go back to your book on document D, page 45, interpret the results. Observe the experiment and you have to interpret the results. How can you interpret? As we said before, interpret meaning that you have to do an analysis, analyze, plus small indication. So in flask 1, air plus blood, it gives bright red color. In flask 2, vacuum, so no air plus blood, it gives a dark red color. While in flask number 3, we have oxygen plus blood, it gives bright red color. So indication. First part, this for this black one is coding for the analysis. So in flask 1, where air flows, the color of blood is bright red. While in flask 2, where there is no air, meaning that we have vacuum, the color of blood becomes dark red. What does this indicate? This indicates that a component of air, when in contact with the blood, it gives the blood its bright red color. While in flask 3, where oxygen gas flows, the bright red color of the blood is restored. What does this indicate? This component of the air, it is oxygen. So this indicates that the presence of oxygen, which is a component or present in air, is responsible for the bright red color of the blood. So how are these gases transported? By hemoglobin. We have forms of transport of oxygen and we have forms of transport of carbon dioxide gases. So of oxygen is transformed in two main forms. First one, which is the highest percentage, 98% of oxygen, they are transported in the form of oxyhemoglobin, HbO8. Two, in the form of oxygen dissolved in plasma, and this represents only 2%. So we have in the form of oxyhemoglobin and in the form of oxygen dissolved in plasma. While carbon dioxide is transformed into three forms. First one is the carbohemoglobin, which is HbCO2. It represents 20%. We have in the form of carbon dioxide dissolved in plasma. It represents 10%, while the highest percentage in the form of bicarbonate dissolved in plasma, it represents 70%. So oxygen, two forms, either oxyhemoglobin, HbO8, or in the form of oxygen dissolved in blood. While in the case of carbon dioxide, it is transported in three forms. First, in the form of carbohemoglobin, in the form of carbon dioxide dissolved in plasma, and three, in the form of bicarbonate dissolved in the plasma. Here we're gonna move to the reaction. In the medium that's rich in O2, mainly it's the lungs, Hb gonna bind to oxygen. So the reaction is like this. The word equation, oxygen plus hemoglobin, it gives oxyhemoglobin, and you have to pay attention to put 4 oxygen. So this is the word equation. Why the chemical? 4O2 plus Hb, it gives HbO8. This one in the medium that is rich in oxygen. While in the medium that is poor in O2, example about these tissues, organs, and so on, HbO8, oxyhemoglobin, gonna dissociate to give oxygen. The word equation is as follows. Oxyhemoglobin gives 4 oxygen plus hemoglobin. Pay attention to the letter 4. While the chemical equation HbO8, it gives 4O2 plus Hb. Moving to the general equation, the word and the chemical one. So general reaction between oxygen and hemoglobin, the word equation is 4O2 plus hemoglobin. In the medium rich in O2, we're gonna move in this direction. In the medium that's poor, we're gonna move in the opposite direction. That means that this reaction is a reversible reaction. So 4O2 plus Hb in the medium rich in O2, we're gonna move in this direction. In the medium poor, we're gonna move in the opposite one. So the reaction, as I said, between oxygen and hemoglobin is reversible, meaning that it's unstable. As hemoglobin binds oxygen in the medium that's rich in oxygen and it releases it, meaning that it releases oxygen in a medium poor in oxygen. Moving to the reaction between carbon dioxide and hemoglobin. This is the medium that's rich in CO2. Carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin, they give something known by carbohemoglobin. The chemical equation is CO2 plus Hb, it gives HbCO2. While the opposite second one in the medium, that is poor in CO2. Example about this, the lungs. HbCO2, which is carbohemoglobin, dissociates to give carbon dioxide. The work division is carbohemoglobin gives carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin. The chemical one, it's HbCO2, it gives Hb plus CO2. These equations, you have to study them. The equation, the reaction of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin in blood, you have to study the word and the chemical. The reaction between oxygen and hemoglobin in blood, you have to study the word and the chemical and the overall equation. So the overall equation, carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin in the medium that's rich, you have to move like this. We have to store carbon dioxide in the form of carbohemoglobin. And the medium that's poor in CO2, we're gonna move in the opposite one. We have to release carbon dioxide by dissociation of carbohemoglobin. This is the word and this is the chemical equation. You have to study both directions. This is also a reversible direction reaction. So this is general equation between carbon dioxide and hemoglobin. So as we said, the reaction between carbon dioxide and hemoglobin is a reversible reaction, meaning that it's unstable. It can occur in both directions. Either carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin, they give carbohemoglobin in the medium that's rich in CO2, and the opposite is true. Carbohemoglobin can give carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin in the medium that's poor in CO2. This shows that as blood flows to the lungs, the hemoglobin and the red cells they bind to oxygen. Hemoglobin and oxygen bind to form something known by oxyhemoglobin. Then, when the blood flows past cells with very little oxygen in them, oxyhemoglobin gonna dissociate to give and release oxygen. Oxygen diffuses into the cells of the body, and finally the hemoglobin goes back to the lungs, and the reaction gonna occur second time, third, and so on. As a conclusion here, gaseous exchange in the alveoli, we have many reaction. O2 gonna be occurred by inhalation in the lungs, and this will cause the oxygen to bind with hemoglobin to give something known by oxyhemoglobin, by Hb in red blood cells or free in plasma, while in the case of the tissue, the CO2 free in plasma or in the form of bicarbonate or carbohemoglobin, HbCO2 is gonna be transported toward the lungs, and reaction here gonna occur by CO2 by exhalation. So oxygen is gonna be transported into two forms, either in form of oxyhemoglobin or in the form of hemoglobin dissolved in plasma. Here, CO2 either dissolved in plasma, this is number one, either in the form of bicarbonate, this is number two, or in the form of carbohemoglobin, which is number three. Here the reaction between carbon monoxide and hemoglobin in blood. Carbon monoxide present in smoke is binding in an irreversible manner, meaning that it's a stable reaction. It can't occur in the opposite direction, meaning that whenever the binding occurs, this will prevent the binding of oxygen and carbon dioxide. As such, less oxygen is delivered to the body cells. So whenever we have carbon monoxide, whenever you get smoking, you are smoking, you used to smoke, so you have to quit. Since whenever the carbon monoxide binds to the hemoglobin, it prevents the binding of oxygen and carbon dioxide. As such, less oxygen is delivered to body cells, so they can produce less energy. You can carbon dioxide is gonna accumulate inside your tissue, leading to intoxication. You're gonna feel fatigue. You're gonna have a lot of problems in breathing. You're gonna have a lot of problems due to the insufficient amount of oxygen in your body. So the chemical equation is CO plus Hb. It gives HbCO. Compare the aspects. Aspects mean the color, the shape of the blood cells entering the lungs to that leaving. Explain this change in color. Blood entering the lungs, as we said, it has a red color, which is a dark red color. Then blood leaving them, which they have a bright red color. Since entering the lungs, blood is poor in oxygen. It means that it's poor in oxyhemoglobin. Blood leaving the lungs, it rich in oxygen, means that's abundant amount of oxyhemoglobin. That's why we have a bright red color. So the bright red color is due to the presence of oxygen that binds to hemoglobin, giving the oxyhemoglobin. Compare the aspects of blood entering the organs to that leaving the organs. Explain the change in color. Blood entering the organs, they have a bright red color. Then the blood leaving them, which has a dark red color. Since entering the organ, blood is rich in oxygen. We have abundant oxyhemoglobin. Yet blood leaving the organs is poor in oxygen, poor in oxyhemoglobin. We have two types in circulation in the human body. Either it's called pulmonary circulation or systemic circulation. Pulmonary is the circulation of blood between the lungs and the heart. It aims to oxygenate blood and get rid of CO2. Oxygenate meaning that gives oxygen to blood. While the systemic is between the heart and all the body organs, while this is between the lungs and the heart only. It is called pulmonary. This is small. While systemic, the general between the heart and all the body organs, it aims to transport oxygen and nutrients to body cells and to drain away their carbon dioxide and waste. Moving here to the last types of reactions here, we have two types of reaction, either oxidation or assimilation. Oxidation is the uses of oxygen and nutrients, mainly glucose, to produce energy, while waste, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, they are released in these reactions. Here we use oxygen and nutrients, mainly glucose, to produce energy, while assimilation reaction, which is called the synthesis reaction, they use nutrients and energy to produce or synthesize new organic molecules such as proteins and carbohydrates. You have to study these notes very well. You have to study all the questions, and you have to look back for the nutrition chapter, which is about the nutritions and the different types of the nutrients that are present inside our body, and we have to get them. And good luck for your exam. Bye bye.